Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that truly touches nearly all of us in the modern world, the undeniable grip of celebrity culture.
It really is everywhere, isn't it?
Absolutely. Think about it, from Hollywood stars gracing the silver screen to the digital influencers we scroll past every day. These figures evoke such a powerful, sometimes overwhelming range of emotions.
Yeah, admiration, maybe obsession sometimes.
Exactly. And often we feel this profound sense of connection, even when they don't know we exist. It's so much more than just superficial appreciation, isn't it?
Definitely. It feels deeper.
It's a deep, often unconscious engagement that prompts a truly fascinating and maybe a bit unsettling question.
Indeed. What we're exploring today isn't just how we engage with celebrity, but why that engagement is so incredibly intense and what deeper sort of underlying dynamics might be at play.
Okay, so what's the big question then?
The central question for this deep dive is really this. In the fervent landscape of celebrity culture, is it truly the fans worshiping the celebrities, or is there a deeper, much more complex interplay going on where something else is being empowered?
Something else, like what?
Well, it forces us to consider if individuals truly control these huge collective forces, the ones generated by all that attention, or if maybe these forces actually begin to control them.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful idea. And to unpack this provocative concept, we're introducing something you might not have encountered before, but one that offers a really compelling framework for this entire discussion. The egregore.
Egregore. It sounds a bit mystical.
It does have that feel, but it's an ancient idea with surprisingly modern relevance.
And what's truly fascinating here is how egregores are described. They're essentially psychic entities or thought forms. Basically non-physical beings shaped by collective thought and intention.
So created by us,
Yeah.
by groups of people thinking the same thing.
Exactly. Emerging from the shared thoughts and, crucially, the shared emotions of a distinct group. And the kicker is, they're thought to influence human behavior in often unseen ways.
Okay, so our collective beliefs and emotional energy might not just influence us back, but could actually create something with a life of its own.
That's the core insight, yeah. Something that might subtly steer our behavior in ways we don't even realize. This concept offers a really nuanced understanding of the power dynamics that underpin our collective fascinations.
Like why we get so invested in celebrities.
Precisely. It suggests that the pervasive admiration and emotional investment in celebrities may not solely stem from individual conscious choice. There might be something bigger at play.
So what does this all mean for us, the listeners? What's the goal here today?
Well, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the origins and mechanics of these egregores, trace the evolution of modern celebrity, how we got here, essentially.
And explore how fandoms act as incubators for these unseen forces.
Exactly. And then critically examine the potential shadow side, when devotion turns into something more like domination.
Right. The goal here is really to equip you, the listener, with a new lens. A new way to understand your own engagement with collective phenomena, whether it's celebrities, brands, or even political movements.
This isn't just theory. It's about potentially seeing your daily interactions, what you click on, what you care about, in a whole new light.
Okay, before we dive deeper, before we go on, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like the video. This podcast is known as the Deep Seek Diaries, and you can find us on the major social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook.
And linked in the description section are all the resources we're discussing today, books, websites, all that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely check those out. You'll also find a link to our website there with all our policies and information. Please go through our terms and conditions as soon as you can. Now sit back and enjoy the deep dive. All right, let's jump right in with our first section. What is an egregore? From ancient watchers to collective thought forms. The term itself carries a rich and, rather mystical history, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The term egregore traces its etymological roots back to the Greek word egregores, which means wakeful or watcher.
Watcher. Okay, that's intriguing.
It is. And its earliest associations are quite profound, linking it directly to the watchers mentioned in the apocryphal Book of Enoch. These were supposedly celestial beings, described as descending to Earth and, interacting with humanity.
So not just a randomly picked word then, it has deep roots.
Definitely not random.
Yeah.
The concept found its way into Western occult usage, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially after the Book of Enoch became more widely translated and accessible. It really resonated with existing mystical traditions.
And we're talking about some pretty significant figures who helped popularize this idea, right? I'm thinking of people like John Dee and Edward Kelly back in the day.
Yes, exactly. Way back in the late 16th century, figures like John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer, and his associate Edward Kelly, they were deeply immersed in mystical pursuits.
Right, seeking lost knowledge, communing with angels, that kind of thing.
That's the story. They actively sought out lost esoteric texts and famously claimed to commune with angels to gain profound knowledge. And their practices later integrated these Enochian ideas related to the Watchers.
And then later on, Eliphas Levi.
Right. Centuries later, in the 19th century, the influential French occultist Eliphas Levi played a significant role in popularizing the term within those esoteric circles. He connected it to these Kabbalistic watchers, often seen in mystical traditions as powerful, supernatural beings tied to ancient wisdom.
And didn't he try to give it a Latin origin, too? Something about a flock?
He did. Interestingly, he even attributed an improbable Latin etymology to it, trying to link it to grex, meaning flock, which just adds another layer to its already complex history.
Even Victor Hugo used it, the author.
Yeah, the renowned French author Victor Hugo used the word, although somewhat obscurely, in his 1859 poem La Légende des siècles. So it shows it had this quiet presence bubbling under the surface in the cultural lexicon.
So the meaning of egregore itself seems to have really shifted and evolved over time. What did it originally mean in those occult circles, and how did that understanding change?
Well, in its earliest occult applications, an egregore was often likened to the Tibetan Buddhist concept of a tulpa.
A tulpa, what's that exactly?
A tulpa is essentially a created spirit or a thought form that's brought into existence through an individual's intense, sustained conscious will or imagination. Pure focus, basically.
Like manifesting something with your mind?
Kind of. Sometimes these tulpas were even intended to serve as a sort of ethereal assistant or servant. But what's intriguing about this original understanding is the inherent ambiguity.
Ambiguity how?
Well, did the entity truly originate purely from human will? Or was there a sense that it might have pre-existed in some form, and the human focus just gave it substance? This question of origin and autonomy is still fundamental to the concept today.
Okay, so it started as an individual creation, but it moved from that to something much larger, involving groups, right? How did that transition happen?
Precisely. Over time, particularly in Western esoteric traditions, the concept evolved to denote something, frankly, far more potent: the deliberate creation of an entity by a group, a collective effort.
So a shared creation.
Yeah, it became understood as a semi-independent manifestation of their collective will. Think of it like a shared idea or belief system that, once it gains enough momentum, enough collective attention, it acquires its own distinct identity.
Okay, that makes sense. But some views see it as more active, even parasitic.
Yes, some interpretations are quite stark. In some views, an egregore functions almost like a replicator, or even a parasite. It compels individuals to perpetuate it, much like a virus spread through a population, demanding to be reproduced.
Wow. A thought as a virus, that's a powerful and slightly unsettling image.
It is. The core insight here is that human collective thought isn't just an internal process. It can, in a very real sense, externalize and potentially gain a life of its own.
So how do contemporary interpretations view this? Is it still this mystical entity, or has it become more metaphorical, like groupthink on steroids?
Contemporary interpretations are quite diverse, honestly. It reflects the complexity and ambiguity of the concept itself. Some still describe egregores very literally as independent angelic beings, maybe those ancient watchers we mentioned, or even as a spiritual elite influencing human affairs from behind the scenes.
Okay, that's the very esoteric end. What about other views?
Then there's a more psychological and sociological interpretation. An egregore is simply a group mind or collective consciousness. This view, shared by figures like René Guénon and Eliphas Levi, suggests it's an emergent property of shared human thought and emotion, a natural outcome of group dynamics.
But still potentially autonomous.
Some define them that way, yes,
Mm-hmm.
as autonomous magical beings born from a collective mind capable of independent action. But what's fascinating here is the range. While some consider it purely metaphorical, just a useful way to think about group dynamics, others genuinely perceive it as an autonomous psychic entity with its own will.
Which keeps that esoteric mystery alive.
Exactly. But the important takeaway, I think, is that even if you view it metaphorically, the effects of that focused collective thought are undeniably real and incredibly powerful.
Okay, so if these entities exist, whether literally or metaphorically, how exactly do they form and grow? What are the practical ingredients for an egregore to come into being and gain strength?
Right, the formation and growth seem intricately tied to a combination of factors: shared belief, intense emotion, sustained attention, and importantly, ritual.
Ritual, like ceremonies.
And not necessarily formal ones. They're said to emerge when faith and attention, if only they are intense and focused on a specific set of ideas and or an influential, real or fictional personality, can create an independent entity. The absolute key is that intensity and focus sustained over time by a group.
So repetition seems vital for this process, like feeding it energy over and over.
Absolutely. These entities gain strength directly through repetition, ritual, and emotional energy. The more individuals invest their belief, their focus, their passion, their emotional energy into these collective thought forms, the more potent and solidified they become.
It's like power in numbers, but for psychic energy.
That's a good way to put it. The logic is quite straightforward. The larger and more focused the group, the greater and stronger the egregores' power becomes. Shared ideas and emotions don't just float around, they coalesce, they merge to form an energetic presence.
And this presence is then solidified by what?
By consistent rituals, symbols, and emotions. It's like building something invisible, brick by energetic brick, reinforced constantly.
That makes perfect sense. And symbols are everywhere in our world, acting as those focal points you mentioned. Things like flags, logos.
They are crucial. Symbols like national flags, corporate logos, team mascots, or even simple chants aren't just arbitrary designs or sounds. They serve as critical focal points that concentrate that collective attention and emotional energy.
So they reinforce the egregores' existence and power.
Precisely. And what's particularly interesting and maybe a bit unsettling for everyday life is that these strengthening practices don't need to be consciously magical or occult at all.
Meaning,
regular practices, whether formal ceremonies or simply habitual behaviors, help strengthen and stabilize the egregore. These don't need to be consciously magical. Corporate meetings, sporting events, or social media engagement can all serve as modern forms of ritual that feed these entities.
wow. So cheering for your team, liking a post, even attending a work meeting could be feeding an egregore.
According to this theory, yes. The takeaway here is that your everyday interactions, the things you pay attention to collectively, are actively contributing to these unseen forces, whether you realize it or not.
So if we step back, egregores aren't just some ancient, obscure, mystical concept tucked away in old books. They're pervasive in modern life, right? We're potentially feeding them all the time without realizing it.
Exactly. They're definitely not confined to the mystical or esoteric realms. The sources really emphasize that they exist in everyday life, shaping religious devotion, political ideologies, and cultural symbols.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can start to see them everywhere. Can you give some examples?
Sure. Think about deeply ingrained religious figures like Jesus, the Virgin Mary, or Ganesha. The collective power around them, sustained by centuries of devotion, prayer, ritual, that can be viewed as a powerful egregore.
Even abstract ideas, like karma, maybe.
Yes. Even abstract constructs like the concept of guardian angels or the pervasive belief in karma can function as egregores. They're constantly reinforced by widespread belief in cultural narratives that give them shape and power.
And popular culture, fictional character.
Absolutely. Moving into popular culture, fictional characters like the ever-logical Sherlock Holmes, the stoic Batman, or even recent internet phenomena like Slender Man are theorized to function as egregores.
How so?
Their existence and power are sustained purely by the imagination and emotional investment of millions. Pop culture entities, in this view, are quite literally fed and get molded by the people that participate directly and indirectly to it becoming actors, writers, fan artists, composers, media people, etc. The whole ecosystem feeds it.
So it's not just mystical or fictional, it's in the corporate world, in politics, everywhere we look. This really opens your eyes.
Precisely. Beyond entertainment, egregores are profoundly reflected in powerful corporate brands like Apple, with its almost religious loyalty or in dominant political ideologies and widespread social movement.
Even nations.
Yes. Even nations, cultures, various subcultures, and governments themselves generate egregoric energy through their shared myths, collective customs, national symbols, and routine behaviors like voting or national holidays.
And the digital age must have supercharged this.
Oh, massively. In the digital age, phenomena like viral trends, vast online communities, and persisting conspiracy theories operate as modern egregores. They grow exponentially through collective participation and profoundly influence public perception, often bypassing traditional gatekeepers.
The key insight seems to be that any sufficiently strong collective belief, attention, and emotion can generate these entities.
That's the core idea, yes.
Okay, this brings us to a critical and, again, slightly unsettling aspect, the paradox of agency. If we create these things through our collective thought and emotion, can they then turn around and control us? It feels like that's the central tension of this whole deep dive.
It is. This raises a profoundly important question about the potential for egregores to shift agency. While they are initially created by collective human thought and intention, these entities can potentially acquire a dynamic, active nature.
Active how?
Well, one source defines an egregore as a thought that acquires its own identity when spreading through society, as an idea that counts as a replicator, specifically in the sense of it acting as a parasite, forcing people to reproduce it, just like viruses do.
Forcing people to reproduce it. Wow. So something we start can take on a life of its own and then compel us to keep it going.
That's what this perspective reveals, yes. That something we initiate can gain autonomy, and then subtly, or maybe not so subtly, compel us to sustain it, to feed it more energy.
So once it's out there, it feeds on us and then dictates our actions. Is that the idea?
That's the feedback loop theory. Once an egregore is formed and sufficiently nourished by our collective energy, our attention, belief, emotion, it can begin to exert influence and control back on its creators.
How does that work?
The more energy it receives, the more powerful it becomes, and the more it can influence its hosts, that's us, to generate even more energy. This parasitic nature directly addresses that central question of who's really worshiping who.
Because it suggests the collective might unknowingly be serving an entity it created.
Exactly. An entity which then dictates its actions and beliefs, pulling the strings from behind the curtain, so to speak.
So what appears to be human worship of a celebrity might, in fact, involve both the celebrity and the fans serving the egregore itself. That really flips the script on how we usually think about fame and fandom.
It absolutely does. This blurs the lines of agency and control dramatically. It hints that the distinction between worshiper and worshipped is far more fluid and complex than we usually assume.
And the celebrity becomes, what, a channel?
In this view, yeah, the celebrity may function as a conduit or a physical manifestation for this accumulated collective energy, a powerful focal point that helps the egregore gather and direct even more power.
Which foreshadows the darker side we mentioned earlier.
Definitely. It foreshadows the shadow side of egregores, where they can become manipulative or even tyrannical, demanding more and more energy.
And the independent existence of egregores is still debated, isn't it? Do they truly become separate entities, or are we just talking about a really strong collective unconscious or groupthink?
Yes, it's a very complex aspect, and the answer really depends on which perspective you adopt. While egregores are consistently described as being created by collective human effort, multiple sources also assert that they can develop an independent existence, gain autonomy, or even take its own control over the group without anyone to stop it.
And there's that ambiguity about whether they pre-existed somehow.
Right. There's even that intriguing ambiguity about whether the entity might have existed in some form beforehand, merely being given substance and power by human focus. That adds to the mystery and the philosophical depth.
That's a profound metaphysical question. Are they just emergent psychological phenomena or something more? Something with its own form of consciousness?
Precisely. It raises profound metaphysical and philosophical questions. Are egregores merely emergent psychological phenomena, a powerful manifestation of group dynamics, or do they genuinely become distinct, non-physical beings with their own agency, maybe even a form of sentience?
And the sources don't give a final answer.
No. The available information presents varied interpretations without a definitive resolution, which, in a way, preserves their esoteric mystery. But regardless of your ontological stance, whether you think they're real or metaphorical, this paradox is central to discerning who's worshiping who. The impact of these collective forces is undeniable either way.
So if an egregore gains autonomy, it means the collective attention and devotion might be empowering something that's no longer aligned with the creator's original intent, something that could lead to unintended, maybe negative consequences. That's a bit unsettling.
That's precisely the implication, and it's a critical one. If egregores gain autonomy, then the collective attention and devotion directed at them, or their manifestations like celebrities, might be empowering something no longer fully aligned with the creator's original positive intentions or aspirations.
Leading to what?
This could lead to genuinely unintended consequences. The created entity might start dictating terms to its creators, potentially resulting in real tyranny over a group, or even demanding a price for its assistance, as some esoteric texts warn.
A price? Like what?
It's often vague, but implies some kind of energetic cost or loss of freedom. It's a powerful idea that demands we consider the unseen forces we might be inadvertently nurturing with our collective focus.
Okay, let's unpack this shift in perspective and move into part two, the evolution and mechanics of modern celebrity. Because obviously without the concept of celebrity as we know it, there's no fertile ground for this particular egregore discussion. So how far back does fame actually go? Was it always like this intense?
Well, the concept of fame has a remarkably long history, actually, dating way back to Roman times. The Latin word fama could refer to rumor, sure, but also to great deeds that would be remembered for millennia.
So the goal was often fame after death, a legacy.
Often, yes. The primary goal was frequently posthumous renown, a lasting legacy after death. Early figures of renown in Europe included politicians, performers, athletes. Think of Alcibiades, Aristophanes, Socrates in ancient Athens, or the Olympic runner Leonidas of Rhodes.
Even saints.
Yes, even medieval saints, through the veneration of their deeds and relics, were essentially considered celebrities of their time. The key difference, perhaps, is that thought was often tied to extraordinary achievement, religious devotion, or political power, and frequently pursued for legacy rather than immediate gratification.
So when did modern celebrity, being famous during your own lifetime, maybe for less tangible reasons, not just after you're gone, really emerge and become a widespread thing?
Modern celebrity, as we kind of understand it today, began to truly take shape much later. Maybe in the 1500s and 1600s, there was a growing public interest in actors, playwrights, humanists. Think of Shakespeare being a known figure, not just his plays being famous.
But the big leap came later.
Right, the 18th century marked a significant leap. Increased literacy rates and, crucially, more affordable, faster printing methods in newspapers, pamphlets propelled public intellectuals like Rousseau, Byron, Voltaire into widespread recognition.
Not just for their writings, but for their personalities.
Exactly, for their public personas.
Mm-hmm.
They became figures of fascination. And interestingly, they even attracted stalkers back then, which is a surprisingly modern-sounding problem for that era.
That's fascinating how those early figures were already dealing with the darker side of fame. And who was the real prototype for what we recognize as a fully modern celebrity? Someone whose fame was truly global and maybe leveraged all the emerging technologies of the time.
The French actress Sarah Bernhardt, active from around 1844 to 1923, is often cited as the first model of modern celebrity. Her career was remarkable in how strategically it leveraged the burgeoning new technologies of her era to amplify her presence.
Like what technologies?
Well, photography made her image widely available, reproducible, something people could have in their homes. The penny press, cheap, mass-produced newspapers amplified her stage roles and her personal life, turning her into a constant topic of conversation.
In travel.
Absolutely. Steamship and railway travel facilitated global tours, bringing her physically to audiences far and wide. And telegraphy allowed news about her to spread incredibly rapidly across continents. This confluence of factors ensured that almost everyone had heard of her, read about her, or seen her picture. She was a truly global icon.
So it's been a gradual build-up, shaped inherently by technological advancements in how we communicate. What this truly reveals is that our fascination with exceptional individuals isn't new, but the scale and intensity of celebrity culture are directly proportional to the media that amplify them.
Exactly. The evolution of celebrity culture has been a gradual process shaped by technological advancements, changing social norms, and the rise of new media platforms. It wasn't an overnight thing.
And this historical journey brings us right to the sophisticated mechanics of modern stardom, particularly through concepts like celebification and commodification. These sound important.
They're key to understanding how it works now.
And that's where we get into things like celebrification and celebritization, right? What's the core difference between those two terms, and why does it matter for this discussion?
That's an excellent question, as they sound similar, but describe distinct processes. Celebrification is the process by which ordinary individuals, people who weren't necessarily famous for any specific talent or achievement, transform into celebrities.
Like reality TV stars.
Exactly. Think of reality TV stars like the Kardashians, who arguably became famous just for being themselves, or at least a version of themselves presented to the public. Celebritization, on the other hand, refers to the broader societal and cultural embedding of celebrity itself, how the concept of fame permeates almost every aspect of our lives, from politics to social causes to marketing.
And these two processes are driven by specific forces in our media landscape.
Yes, they're powerfully propelled by three interconnected forces. First, there's mediatization, which highlights celebrities' constant and inescapable presence in news and entertainment. This has been significantly amplified by formats like reality television, where cameras follow people's lives almost constantly, blurring lines between public and private.
Okay, mediatization, what's second?
Second is personalization. This involves actively creating a sense of intimacy and direct connection with audiences, making fans feel like they know the celebrity personally even though they don't.
And the third force?
Finally, commodification. This transforms celebrities into marketable brands. Their image and persona aren't just admired. They're actively constructed, marketed, and sold like any other product.
And this isn't new either, right? Hollywood was doing this ages ago.
Absolutely. Historically, Hollywood's studio system was a powerful engine for manufacturing and maintaining these celebrity images, effectively merging the idea of celebrity with commercial interests long before the internet even existed. The combined impact of these three forces, mediatization, personalization, commodification, means celebrity isn't just entertainment. It's a pervasive cultural and economic phenomenon.
And now it's even more widespread, isn't it? The democratization of celebrity feels like anyone with a phone and enough followers can become famous.
Precisely. The 21st century has witnessed a dramatic democratization of celebrity, driven massively by reality television shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians being a prime example, bringing the private lives of otherwise ordinary people into the public eye, and of course the pervasive influence of social media.
So what does this democratization really mean in practice?
Well, it means that celebrities, whether traditional or influencer types, function as cultural texts. They act as signs and symbols that embody societal values, ideologies, and reflect broader issues like class, gender, race, and sexuality.
So their public persona isn't accidental, it's a construct.
Largely, yes. In plain terms, their public persona isn't accidental. It's often a meticulously built brand designed specifically to grab attention and be financially viable. They're essentially described as constructed subjectivity consisting of distinct sets of self-referential, attention-seeking, market-aware practices. It's a performance, carefully curated for public consumption and profit.
Here's where it gets really interesting psychologically, because this constructed intimacy feels so real to people. Tell us about parasocial relationships, because this seems absolutely foundational to how we engage with celebrities today.
It really is. A cornerstone of modern celebrity culture is the powerful illusion of intimacy fostered through what psychologists call parasocial relationships. Parasocial interaction, PSI, describes a psychological relationship where audiences engage with media personas, this includes celebrities, influencers, even fictional characters, as if they are engaged in a reciprocal relationship with them.
As if, but they're not. It's one way.
Exactly. This experience is, by definition, inherently illusory because it's a one-way street. The celebrity doesn't know you exist, usually. The core insight here is that our brains are wired for social connection, and media effectively tricks our social instincts into believing these are real two-way bonds.
So it's a one-way street, but it feels mutual to the fan, almost like a real friendship. That's incredibly powerful psychologically.
It is. Through repeated exposure to a media persona, watching their shows, following their social media feeds, reading articles about them, a simple parasocial interaction can evolve into a deeper, more enduring parasocial relationship.
Leading to what kinds of feelings?
This leads to the development of profound illusions of intimacy, friendship, and identification. Fans often feel genuinely loyal and directly connected to the persona, similar to how they connect with close friends, even though that connection exists entirely in their own mind.
And social media has just poured gasoline on this fire, hasn't it? It feels like we're closer to celebrities than ever before, seeing into their lives.
It has profoundly revolutionized celebrity culture, precisely because it offers additional opportunities for parasocial relationships to intensify due to more intimate, reciprocal, and frequent interactions, or at least interactions that feel reciprocal.
How so?
Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, they've blurred the traditional lines between established celebrities and new influencers, making it seem like you can directly interact with almost anyone famous. The mere possibility of receiving a direct message or retweet from a celebrity, though statistically unlikely, gives fans a potent sense of intimacy and authenticity to these one-sided relationships. Feels like a real connection is possible.
And celebrities play into this.
Absolutely. Celebrities actively utilize social media to participate in shaping their image and to remain relevant in a very crowded media landscape. They share personal anecdotes, respond occasionally, all of which further fuels this powerful illusion of closeness.
Beyond this illusion, what are the core psychological drivers that lead to such deep engagement with celebrity? Why do we get so invested, sometimes to an obsessive degree?
There are several powerful psychological factors at play that draw us in so deeply. Firstly, a big one is simple escapism and fantasy.
Escaping mundane life.
Exactly. Fans are often drawn to celebrities as a means of escapism and fantasy. They seek refuge from the mundane realities or stresses of their daily lives, finding temporary refuge in the realm of imagination when engaging with compelling celebrity stories, glamorous lifestyles, or aspirational fictional characters. It's a way to live vicariously through someone else's seemingly perfect life.
So a way to project our own dreams and desires onto them.
Precisely. Identification and social comparison are also incredibly powerful drivers. Individuals often project our desires, dreams, and unfulfilled ambitions onto celebrities, viewing their success, their beauty, or their talent as a kind of mirror reflecting our own unrealized potential.
They become avatars for what we want.
In a way, yes. Celebrities serve as avatars for our aspirations and function as aspirational figures, role models, or companions. They become symbols of what we wish we could be or have, embodying success, beauty, or freedom.
And there's a neurological component to all this engagement too, right? Our brains are literally wired to react strongly.
Yes, there absolutely is. The brain's reward system, involving the release of dopamine, the feel-good chemical, gets activated when we engage with things we enjoy, including celebrity content. And the mirror neuron system, which facilitates empathy and allows us to simulate others' experiences in our own minds, contributes to the heightened pleasure and emotional investment experienced in fandom.
So we feel their joy, their pain.
To some extent, yes. When we see a celebrity succeed or suffer, our brains react similarly to how they would if it were happening to us or a close friend. Additionally, cognitive biases amplify celebrity influence significantly.
Like the halo effect.
Exactly. The halo effect means their excellence in one domain, like beauty or athletic talent, unconsciously extends to other areas in our perception. We assume they must be smart or kind, too, lending unearned credibility to their opinions or product endorsements.
And social proof, if everyone loves them.
Right. Social proof plays a huge role. The widespread adoration of a celebrity by millions suggests they must have merit, leading others to follow suit, thinking, well, if everyone loves them, they must be great. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle of popularity.
Now, this seems like a paradox we need to explore. Social media brings us seemingly closer, fostering that intimacy, but you mentioned it also creates what's called a mediated center. How does that work, and what does it reveal about the true nature of modern celebrity distance?
This is a crucial point that highlights the nuanced, almost contradictory reality of modern celebrity. The pervasive nature of social media, while seemingly democratizing celebrity and fostering that feeling of intimacy, paradoxically creates what scholars call a mediated center that actually reinforces the distance between public figures and their audiences.
Reinforces it. Even with DMs and Instagram stories showing their real lives, it feels like we're seeing everything.
It feels that way. But the argument is that while social media is lauded for fostering intimate, open, reciprocal, and frequent interactions and democratizing celebrity, the reality is that celebrities actually remain distanced from the ordinary precisely because of their mediated status.
So it's still an us versus them dynamic, just presented differently.
In a way, yes. Their transformation into public figures, constantly documented and presented through media, is described as a media ritual that both confirms the separation and legitimates the myth of the mediated center. This means the very platforms that promise closeness actually work to reinforce their elevated, separate status.
There's a quote about this, isn't there? Something about screens.
Yes, it's underscored by the observation that celebrities are only ever of relevance to the masses when viewed form behind a screen. The moment he becomes a real interactive person, the show is over. This really highlights that the perceived intimacy is largely an illusion, a carefully constructed performance designed for the screen.
So the democratization is more about giving us access to a meticulously curated version of them, a performance of authenticity, rather than the actual, messy, real person.
That's a great way to put it. It's access to a carefully managed persona.
What does this mean for the egregore concept we're exploring? This strategic distance, paradoxically, seems to make the celebrity a more potent symbol, a better anchor for collective energy, rather than less so.
It absolutely does. This dynamic is crucial for understanding how celebrities might function within the egregore framework. The mediated center ensures that collective attention remains focused on an idealized, somewhat unattainable figure.
Why is that more effective?
Because it's far more effective for sustaining a powerful collective thought form than a fully humanized, relatable, or flawed individual would be. The strategic distance, paradoxically, enhances the ability for fans to project their ideals, hopes, and dreams onto the celebrity. They become a cleaner screen for projection.
Making them a more potent and stable symbol for that collective energy.
Precisely. Thereby strengthening the egregore that forms around them. If they were too real, too flawed, too accessible, the collective dream, the idealized image that fuels the egregore, might shatter. The distance maintains the magic, in a sense.
This also leads directly into what we might call the egregore economy, doesn't it? It's the commodification of attention, where our fascination, our clicks, our views directly translate into measurable economic inputs. It's not just admiration, it's business.
It's a direct and incredibly powerful link. Celebrities are increasingly referred to not just as entertainers or artists, but explicitly as brands and influencers, actively engaging in sophisticated personal branding.
And that branding is all about money.
Primarily, yes. This branding is directly linked to financial gains through their own fame and status. It represents a strategic endeavor to increase visibility, expand their fan base, and enhance their influence across various industries, specifically looking for new opportunities for collaborations and endorsements. It's not just about acting or singing anymore, it's about leveraging fame to monetize their entire persona.
So their whole identity, even curated parts of their personal life revealed online, are being meticulously managed and monetized as assets.
Yes, exactly. A celebrity's identity, their image, and even curated aspects of their personal life, often revealed through strategic self-disclosure on social media, are meticulously managed and monetized assets in the modern economy.
And our attention fuels this.
Absolutely. This commodification transforms our collective attention and emotional investment, our admiration, our hopes, our dreams projected onto them, into measurable economic inputs. Fans are not just passive consumers of content, they become active participants in an attention economy that directly monetizes their collective focus and emotional energy.
So the core insight here is that your engagement, even a simple like or share, has tangible economic value that feeds this whole system.
Precisely. You're contributing capital, in a way.
This sounds like a self-perpetuating feedback loop, where the more attention and emotion we give, the more economic power they gain, and the more content they create to get us to give even more.
It creates an incredibly powerful feedback loop. The egregore, viewed as the collective entity surrounding the celebrity brand, is sustained and grows stronger by these emotional and financial offerings from the fans.
And then the egregore empowers the celebrity.
In turn, this empowered egregore, or the collective energy it represents, then fuels the celebrity as brand to generate even more compelling content and engagement, thereby attracting more offerings, more attention, more money from their audience.
So it directly links the esoteric concept of feeding an egregore with the very real economic mechanisms of modern digital culture.
Yes, it suggests that the worship isn't just emotional. It's also a form of economic transaction. We're not just buying products endorsed by them. We're investing our energy and resources into maintaining this invisible collective entity.
Okay, let's connect all these threads now. This brings us perfectly to part 3, the nexus. Fandoms as egregore incubators. This is where the magic, or perhaps as you said, the manipulation really seems to happen, because fandoms seem like absolutely perfect environments for these collective thought forms to brew, doesn't it?
They absolutely are. Fandoms serve as incredibly potent incubators for egregores. They are prime examples of collective thought forms where mental and emotional constructs are brought into existence and sustained by the shared focus, energy, and intent of a group of individuals.
And that energy synchronizes.
Yes. Within fandoms, the collective energy can quite literally synchronize emotions across individuals, creating dramatic shifts and surges in group intensity. Think about being at a concert or a fan event that shared buzz. This shared enthusiasm and collective experience foster an environment highly conducive to developing intense parasocial relationships and a powerful sense of community.
So the core insight is that when many people focus intense emotional energy on the same thing, they aren't just individually feeling it, they're collectively creating something.
That's the idea. Creating an energetic field, an egregore.
And what's interesting is that the fans' everyday activities, even seemingly mundane ones like scrolling social media or buying merchandise, are basically feeding these things, acting like modern rituals that reinforce the egregore.
Precisely. Regular practices within fandoms, from commenting on social media posts and sharing fan theories to creating elaborate fan art or writing fan fiction or attending real-world conventions, all function as modern forms of ritual that feed these entities.
Even just clicking like.
Potentially, yes. Symbols, logos, specific gestures like hand signs, and chants unique to the fandom also play a crucial role in reinforcing the egregore's existence and acting as focal points for its energy. As we noted earlier, pop culture entities are often viewed as egregores that are fed and get molded by the people that participate directly and indirectly to its becoming. Every engagement, every purchase, every shared meme arguably acts as a small energetic contribution, a building block.
So the celebrities themselves, or maybe the core fictional characters, become the anchors for these collective energies, these egregores. They're the physical or symbolic manifestation of this collective thought.
Yes, exactly. Celebrities become central focal points, acting as physical anchors for these egregores. They effectively channel and focus the collective energy generated by the fandom.
How does that work physically?
Well, their carefully curated public persona, their consistent media presence across multiple platforms, and their meticulously managed image serve as a kind of nexus, a point where millions of individual thoughts, emotions, and projections coalesce into a powerful collective entity. They are the visible tip of an invisible iceberg of collective attention and energy.
But it doesn't always have to be a living person anchoring it, does it? We've talked about fictional characters like Batman or Sherlock Holmes. They seem to anchor egregores just as effectively, maybe even more so, because they never truly die or disappoint in the same way a real person might.
That's a fascinating and crucial point. Influential figures, whether real or fictional, can give rise to egregores that persist and even evolve long after their physical presence is gone. For instance, after Buddha's physical death, some esoteric traditions suggest only the egregore of Buddha remained, continuing to evolve based on the changing hopes, fears, and beliefs of his followers over centuries.
So the egregore outlives the person.
Potentially, yes. Similarly, theorists propose that enduring fictional characters like the enigmatic Sherlock Holmes, the ever-vigilant Batman, or even relatively recent internet phenomena like Slender Man function as egregores, sustained by the imagination and emotional investment of millions across generations.
So how are they sustained?
Through fan engagement, creative works like fan fiction, fan art, the continuous development of shared lore around these characters. All this contributes significantly to their egregoric strength and remarkable longevity. In this context, egregores are often described as anthropomorphic entities conjured in the image of human beliefs, providing human hosts a representational narrative vessel to manifest their desires and beliefs.
So it highlights that the collective human mind can bring something into being and sustain it, whether the focal point is flesh and blood or purely imaginative. A living person isn't strictly necessary.
Exactly. Collective belief and attention alone can provide the necessary energy, creating entities that endure for decades, even centuries.
So there's this dynamic reciprocal loop here. Fans feed the egregore with attention and emotion, and the egregore in turn influences both the fans and maybe even the celebrity or the source material. It's a complete ecosystem.
It's a truly dynamic feedback system. Once formed and sufficiently powerful, egregores can become, according to the theory, autonomous, exerting influence on group members, subtly shaping their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions.
How does that influence grow?
Well, the longer individuals remain part of a group, a fandom, for instance, the more their thoughts align with the egregore, amplifying its influence. Their thinking becomes more attuned to the collective. This establishes a tight feedback loop between fans, often referred to as stans in modern parlance, and their idols, or the object of their fandom.
And that shared energy reinforces the group bond.
Yes, the collective energy generated by the fandom amplifies shared experiences and reinforces the bond within the group. But here's the critical, often overlooked part. The egregore, once sufficiently powerful, potentially begins to exert control back on its creators.
Control.
This influence can manifest in various ways. It could be the collective entity dictating group norms and acceptable behavior. It might subtly influence the celebrity's actions and creative choices to better align with the egregore's perceived nature. Or even, as one metaphorical example suggests, a band being driven by an all-encompassing force and egregore to do nothing beyond a singular focused purpose to make money, losing its original artistic drive.
Which raises that profound question again. Are fans truly supporting their idol? Or is the idol and the fans inadvertently serving the collective entity they've created together?
It forces us to question the direction of the energy flow.
I hope you are enjoying the topic so far. Please subscribe to the DeepSeek Diaries and like this video.
Don't forget you can find us on the major social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Linked in the description section are all resources and discussion today, including books, websites, and so on.
Yeah, we appreciate your support in helping us continue these deep dives. Now let's look at some real-world examples because this really brings the concept to life. We've got some powerful case studies in collective devotion. First up, Taylor Swift's Swifties. They're an absolute phenomenon in themselves.
The Swifties truly exemplify this kind of intense collective devotion. They're characterized by their incredible dedication and creative fan works and their immense power to mobilize collective action. This community actively creates meaning, joy, and connection through fandom, fostering extraordinarily strong parasocial relationships, where fans often feel a certain ownership or connection over a celebrity.
And their collective activities really feed into this.
Massively. Their collective engagement, which famously includes things like deciphering Easter eggs embedded in Swift's music videos and lyrics, organizing coordinated social media campaigns for album releases, and pursuing unified streaming goals to break records. All these activities actively contribute to and reinforce the collective narrative and the energetic egregore surrounding her persona.
The Eras Tour was a perfect example.
Absolutely. The Eras Tour, for example, became an unprecedented cultural and economic phenomenon with widespread social impact. And there's a widely perceived ability of Taylor Swift herself to influence even political discourse, demonstrating the potential reach and power of the egregore she anchors.
What about their symbols and rituals?
Their symbols are everywhere. The iconic TS logo, specific album imagery like the Midnight's Clock, the ubiquitous friendship bracelets exchanged ritualistically at concerts, and specific colors associated with different musical eras. Their rituals involve elaborate streaming parties online, buying multiple album versions, sometimes just for different covers or bonus tracks, attending concerts, often requiring extreme effort and expense, and engaging in vast online communities dedicated to fan fiction, fan art, and intense discussions.
And the emotional investment seems off the charts.
Incredibly intense, yes. Connecting deeply to Taylor Swift's personal storytelling seems key, leading to profound feelings of connection, identification, and even, as mentioned, a sense of ownership over her narrative and career.
Okay, next, let's talk about the BTS Army. They're legendary for their organization and their ability to mobilize for specific causes, sometimes even political ones.
The BTS Army fandom stands as another powerful illustration of participatory fan culture and a remarkably strong collective identity. They are renowned globally for their highly organized collective action and truly impressive, rapid mobilization around shared values and goals.
Can you give some examples of that mobilization?
Well, notable instances of their collective power include raising $1 million for the Black Lives Matter movement in just a single day, directly matching the band's own donation that showed astonishing philanthropic coordination.
And the political actions.
Yes. They also notably engaged in what were called Twitter wars against Donald Trump's supporters. They strategically booked thousands of tickets for one of his rallies with no intention of actually attending, thereby deflating expected turnout numbers, and they also flooded negative or opposing hashtags with unrelated fan content. This showcased a coordinated, almost military-like precision in their online activism.
Wow. What about their symbols and rituals, similar to the Swifties?
Similar dynamics, different specifics. Their symbols include the distinct BTS logo, the official light stick called the Army Bomb, which synchronizes at concerts, the Borahae purple color that's become synonymous with their community identity, and specific hand gestures known mainly to fans. Their rituals involve incredibly coordinated streaming goals for new music releases, mass merchandise purchases to support the band financially, extensive fan-generated content like fan fiction and elaborate fan videos, and passionate, often very protective online debates.
And the emotional core for them.
The emotional investment seems very deep, connecting strongly to BTS's core message of self-love, mental health awareness, and inclusivity. This fosters an unparalleled sense of belonging and camaraderie within the truly global Army community. It's a powerful collective force.
And it's crucial to remember it's not just living celebrities who can anchor these powerful egregores. Fictional characters like those in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Star Wars also have these incredibly dedicated, long-lasting fandoms that seem to function similarly.
That's absolutely right. The concept of egregores extends powerfully beyond living public figures to fictional characters and entire fictional universes, demonstrating again that sustained collective belief and emotional investment are the true fuel.
So characters like Sherlock Holmes or Batman, they're egregores.
Theorists suggest exactly that. Characters like the brilliant Sherlock Holmes, the ever-resilient Batman, or even the more recent internet-born Slender Man function as egregores, sustained by the imagination and emotional investment of millions across generations.
How do fans sustain them?
Through constant engagement. Fan fiction, fan art, cosplay, endlessly debating theories, developing shared lore around these characters. All of this contributes significantly to their egregoric strength and remarkable longevity. Their symbols are things like iconic character imagery, the Batman symbol, the Jedi insignia, specific catchphrases, elementary "My dear Watson, may the Force be with you," and unique, instantly recognizable costumes or props.
And their rituals, conventions.
Yes. Rituals include attending massive conventions like Comic-Con, creating intricate fan art and fan fiction, engaging in elaborate cosplay, participating in vibrant online forums and dedicated subreddits, and endlessly rewatching the source media.
And the emotional connection is just as real.
Absolutely. There's profound empathy with characters' triumphs and struggles, and a deep emotional fulfillment derived from engaging with compelling stories and worlds that feel intensely real and meaningful to the fans. This clearly demonstrates that a physical, living person isn't strictly necessary for an egregore to form and thrive. Collective belief and attention alone can provide the necessary energy, creating entities that endure for decades, even centuries, long after their original creators are gone.
So with all this talk of highly coordinated action, like the army booking rally tickets almost automatically, it leads to a truly provocative question posed in some of the source material. Is a fandom a botnet? It's a bit unsettling to think about fandom in those terms.
It's a compelling and intentionally provocative analogy, yeah. It highlights the remarkable capabilities of highly organized fandoms for collective action and rapid mobilization. The organic activity of online fandoms is described quite strikingly in one source as already a relatively automatic phenomena, with their collective actions sometimes likened to a distributed denial of service, DOS attack, in terms of overwhelming online systems or conversations.
What's the implication of the botnet analogy?
Well, a botnet, for context, implies a network of compromised computer entities controlled remotely by a central authority for a unified, often malicious, purpose. This analogy suggests that within highly cohesive and intensely emotionally invested fandoms, individual members' actions can become so coordinated and predictable, almost reflexive, that they resemble automated behavior, moving with a singular, seemingly unthinking purpose.
And this really questions individual agency within the group, doesn't it? Is it purely organic, unadulterated passion driving these coordinated actions? Or is something else, perhaps the egregore itself, the collective consciousness, beginning to subtly direct the collective?
Precisely. It raises profound questions about the true source of this coordination. Is it purely emergent from shared passion and organic community organizing? Or does the egregore itself, the collective entity, begin to direct the group, leading to a subtle, perhaps entirely unnoticed, loss of individual autonomy among its members?
So in this view, the worship then becomes a form of unwitting participation in a larger self-directing system.
That's the implication. This profoundly impacts the core question of who's worshiping who. If fans can, at times, act with the coordinated force of a botnet, it prompts serious reflection on whether they are truly exercising individual agency in those moments, or if they are being so consciously programmed or influenced by the very egregore they collectively sustain.
It highlights the potential for these collective entities to become powerful, almost sentient forces that can direct human behavior on a massive scale.
Yes, potentially even beyond the conscious intent or awareness of individual members. It really blurs the lines between conscious, chosen fandom and a kind of unconscious servitude to the collective will. It means your actions, while feeling fully your own and driven by passion, might actually be serving a larger, unseen agenda or entity.
And the role of consumerism in all of this is huge, isn't it? It seems like consumerism isn't just a byproduct of fandom, like buying a t-shirt to show support, but a truly embedded ritual that actively feeds these entities. It's part of the structure.
It certainly appears to be, based on these analyses. The activities undertaken by modern fandoms can be recontextualized as powerful rituals that feed egregores, particularly through various, often constant forms of consumerism.
Like what kinds of activities?
Fandoms engage in incredibly diverse activities, ranging from highly organized streaming campaigns to boost chart positions to massive merchandise purchases, and extending to the pervasive, everyday digital interactions like likes, shares, viral trends, and digital interaction patterns. These seemingly mundane fan engagements are explicitly identified in some sources as regular practices, whether formal ceremonies or simply habitual behaviors that help strengthen and stabilize the egregore.
And these don't need to be consciously magical.
Right. As stated before, these don't need to be consciously magical. Corporate meetings, sporting events, or social media engagement can all serve as modern forms of ritual that feed these entities. Buying merch fits right in there.
So spending money on your idol, buying their albums, their concert tickets, their branded merchandise, that's literally a form of modern worship, an energetic and financial offering to this collective entity. That's a pretty radical way to look at shopping.
It's presented as a significant and essential component of the egregores' sustenance in this framework. Furthermore, it is explicitly clarified in research on fandoms like the BTS Army that monetary participation has long been viewed as the ultimate proof of fanship within some highly dedicated fandoms, and that the consumerism isn't just a byproduct of fandom, it's deeply embedded in its structure, shaping ARMY's collective identity, for example.
So it establishes a direct and powerful link between everyday fan engagement, including their economic activities like buying things, and the strengthening of the egregore.
Exactly. These activities are framed not merely as expressions of personal admiration or support, but as active, repetitive, energetic, and tangible financial investments that contribute directly to the egregore's power and influence.
So the more you buy, the more you stream, the more you engage financially, the stronger the egregore becomes, almost literally.
That's the logical conclusion of this perspective, yes. The more frequently these consumerist rituals are performed by the collective, the more potent the egregore becomes. This reframes consumerism and digital engagement, not just as market activity or personal choice, but as forms of modern worship or energetic sacrifice fueling a collective entity.
Which makes the question, who's worshiping who, particularly poignant here.
It really does. Are fans truly and consciously supporting an artist and their creative brand? Or are their consumption patterns and online actions unconsciously feeding a collective entity that then dictates further consumption and behavior, creating a loop? It suggests a subtle, pervasive form of influence operating through the very fabric of modern digital culture and commerce, where your economic activity itself becomes a ritual feeding an unseen force, shaping your behavior in ways you might not even perceive.
That's a truly powerful and maybe slightly disturbing idea to ponder as we scroll and click. Let's shift now, though, to part 4. The shadow side, when devotion turns to domination. We've talked about the power and creation of these egregores, but what's their malign potential? When does this collective energy become truly dangerous or harmful?
Right, because while the collective energy of fandom can undeniably foster community, joy, and even positive social action, it also possesses a darker aspect, a potential where devotion can dangerously morph into domination or unhealthy obsession.
Not all egregores are friendly helpers, then.
According to these theories, definitely not. Not all egregores are benign. Some are described as having the potential to become parasitic or manipulative, feeding off belief and devotion for their own growth and sustenance, often without regard for the well-being of their creators.
And if they gain autonomy?
Once an egregore attains autonomy and sufficient power, the idea is that it can potentially escape its control and take its own control over the group without anyone to stop it, potentially leading to what some esoteric sources explicitly describe as real tyranny within or by the group.
So they can become truly harmful, even destructive, not just controlling.
Some esoteric perspectives are quite pessimistic, even contending that there are no good egregores, only negative ones. They argue that while an egregore might act as an efficacious magical ally and provide assistance or power to a group, its help inevitably comes at a price that may not be immediately apparent.
What kind of price?
It could be a loss of individual freedom, a demand for constant energy, or pushing the group towards negative actions. Some interpretations go even further, describing egregores metaphorically or literally as generated curses or hexes that ultimately assume control of their conjurers, turning the creator into the servant.
And if left unchecked?
If left unchecked, these entities, whether you view them as literal beings or powerful psychological forces, can even take on destructive qualities, leading to radicalization, cult-like devotion, or social division. The core insight here is that collective energy, if left undirected, unexamined, or focused on negative ideals, can become a force that consumes rather than empowers.
This sounds an awful lot like what we sometimes see with extreme fan behavior, particularly relating to the psychological dangers. Tell us about celebrity worship syndrome, CWS. Is that connected?
The psychological dangers of extreme, unhealthy obsession with celebrities are well documented under the umbrella term celebrity worship syndrome, or CWS, and the parallels are certainly relevant here. CWS is clinically defined as an obsessive addictive disorder in which a person becomes overly involved with the details of a celebrity's personal and professional life.
So it's not just healthy admiration, it's an actual disorder.
It's considered an obsessive addictive disorder, yes. It's an all-consuming focus that negatively impacts a person's life. And importantly, CWS manifests along a spectrum of intensity, ranging from relatively mild interest to severe pathological obsession.
Tell us about that spectrum. What are the different levels and what do they entail?
Okay, so at the lowest level, there's the entertainment social dimension. This involves healthy admiration, enjoying celebrity news for entertainment, and sharing enthusiasm with friends and other fans. This is generally considered harmless fun.
The middle level.
Next is the intense personal level. This signifies a more moderate, albeit often unhealthy, obsession with the celebrity. Individuals at this level might feel intense identification, think about the celebrity constantly, and it's frequently linked in studies to higher neuroticism and fantasy proneness in the individual. This is where the parasocial relationship starts to feel very, very real and central to their life.
And the most extreme end.
The most extreme and dangerous level is borderline pathological CWS. This involves extreme pathological attitudes and behaviors. Research links this level to traits associated with psychoticism, narcissism, addictive tendencies, and even concerning behaviors like compulsive buying of celebrity-related items, stalking, or harboring delusions about a relationship with this celebrity.
So the key insight here is that what begins as seemingly harmless admiration or fun can escalate insidiously into a serious psychological disorder with potentially devastating consequences.
Exactly. It's a slippery slope for some individuals.
And the consequences for the individual must be truly significant, going beyond just financial strain from buying merch or tickets.
They absolutely are. The negative consequences for individuals suffering from the more intense forms of CWS are significant and multifaceted. They often encompass developing unrealistic expectations about their own lives and relationships based on the curated perfection they see.
And a loss of self.
Yes, a profound loss of identity and autonomy as their sense of self becomes increasingly intertwined with the celebrity's life and image. This often leads to deep feelings of inadequacy, depression, and low self-esteem because their own life can't compare.
Body image issues, too.
Definitely. It can also contribute significantly to poor body image as individuals constantly compare themselves to the often impossibly perfect, digitally altered images of celebrities. This has even been linked to an increased willingness to undergo cosmetic surgery to emulate their idols.
That impersonal perfection seems key.
Right. The impersonal perfection projected onto celebrities can exacerbate these feelings of inadequacy as individuals compare their own messy, complex, imperfect lives unfavorably to the idealized, simplified images presented. Some argue this contributes significantly to the rampant rise of mental illness, particularly among young people exposed constantly to these ideals online.
The parallels between intense fandoms and, well, cult dynamics are often striking, aren't they? It feels uncomfortable to say, but that's where this devotion can really go off the rails, moving from a supportive community to something more sinister and controlling.
They are indeed striking, and it's a comparison that, while potentially controversial, compels us to look closer at the dynamics of unchecked devotion and group influence. Cults, almost by definition, frequently develop powerful egregores, collective thought forms centered around the leader or ideology that demand absolute loyalty, shaping followers' perceptions and behaviors to align perfectly with the group's agenda and the leader's will.
And many characteristics seem shared between intense fandoms and cults.
Yes, researchers who study cults point to several characteristics that can, worryingly, appear in some highly intense fandoms as well. Things like absolute authoritarianism without accountability within the group's leadership or core influential members, zero tolerance for criticism or questions directed at the idol or the fandom's actions, developing unreasonable fears about the outside world or rival fandoms, creating an us versus them paranoia, a strong belief that former followers are always wrong for leaving the fandom, often leading to harassment. And sadly, in extreme cases, even documented instances of abuse of members within the group, whether that's emotional, financial, or sometimes even escalating.
So these fandoms can cultivate a really strong tribal mentality, an us versus them mindset, which can easily become quite toxic and exclusionary.
Yes. Fandoms often cultivate a strong sense of tribalism, which, while providing belonging, can unfortunately lead to an us versus them mentality and toxic behavior directed at those perceived as outsiders, critics, or even dissenters within the fandom itself, anti-self.
And the financial pressure we talked about.
Right. Furthermore, as we discussed, monetary participation has long been viewed as the ultimate proof of fanship within some fandoms. Extreme celebrity worship can result in severe financial strain and irresponsible spending habits for fans, sometimes pushing them into debt or neglecting other responsibilities, which mirrors financial exploitation seen in cults.
And while maybe not applicable directly to most celebrities, cult leaders often have specific traits.
It's worth noting, yes, that researchers find cult leaders often exhibit the dark triad personality traits, meaning they tend towards Machiavellianism, manipulative, psychopathy, lack of empathy, and narcissism, excessive self-admiration. They employ tactics of isolation, love bombing, and emotional manipulation. While most celebrities aren't cult leaders, these characteristics highlight the potential for destructive leadership or influence within any highly cohesive group, including intense fandoms, especially if negative dynamics take hold.
So when we ask who's worshiping who, in the context of this cult analogy, it becomes even more stark, more unsettling. The dynamic feels like it flips entirely from chosen admiration to something truly coercive or harmful.
It really does. This comparison is crucial, I think, for comprehending the full spectrum of control and influence that egregores and the celebrities or figures embodying them can potentially exert. It's vital to stress this is an analogy for understanding potentially harmful dynamics, not a literal classification of all fandoms as cults. That would be unfair and inaccurate.
But the parallels are useful for understanding the risks.
Exactly. However, when egregores potentially become parasitic or manipulative, they can begin to demand absolute loyalty and subtly, or not so subtly, shape followers' perceptions and behaviors, mirroring the control dynamics observed in cults. Consequences like the abuse of members, often emotional or social shunning within fandoms, or severe financial strain placed on fans, become direct manifestations of this unchecked collective influence.
So the shadow side really emerges when the collective entity, the egregore, once empowered by the fans, begins to dictate terms back to its creators. It's like the creation becomes the master, demanding sacrifice.
Exactly. This leads to a situation where the worship transitions from freely given admiration to a profound form of unwitting servitude. Individuals' actions become increasingly governed by the perceived will of the egregore or the rigid norms of the collective, rather than stemming from their own conscious, autonomous choice and critical thinking.
Which directly addresses our core question.
Yes, profoundly. It suggests that the created entity, the egregore, can indeed transform its creators, the fans, into subjects of its influence, potentially leading to significant psychological harm and a severe loss of individual agency and identity. It highlights the very fine line between healthy collective identity and belonging and potentially harmful groupthink or mob mentality, emphasizing how easily collective devotion can be redirected to serve the entity itself rather than the well-being of the individuals within it.
And one of the biggest, most insidious costs of this kind of unconscious devotion seems to be the erosion of individual identity and critical thinking. You literally lose yourself in the collective, forgetting who you are outside of it.
That's identified as a significant and deeply concerning cost, yes. The erosion of individual identity and critical thinking. We saw celebrity worship syndrome often leads to a loss of identity, as a person's sense of self becomes blurred with or subsumed by their idol, resulting in low self-esteem and deeply unrealistic expectations for their own life because it doesn't match the fantasy.
And the projection plays a role here, too.
Yes, fans frequently project their own emotions, values, or desires onto celebrities, essentially living vicariously through them instead of cultivating their own lives. This psychological projection, combined with the constant, often subconscious comparison to the inhuman ideals of greatness portrayed by celebrities, which are, again, often heavily curated and artificial, inevitably fosters feelings of inadequacy and dissatisfaction in their own lives.
And the group dynamics suppress questioning.
Right. The blurring lines between admiration and obsession and the inherent tribalism found within many intense fandoms can actively suppress critical thinking and dissenting opinions. Group cohesion, conformity, and loyalty to the idol and the group are often prioritized over individual discernment or questioning the narrative, leading to a kind of collective cognitive capture.
So the egregore, or the collective force it represents, whether consciously manipulated or not, fosters an environment where independent thought is discouraged, maybe even punished, where the group truth becomes paramount.
Exactly. The egregore, by embodying collective ideals and reinforcing group norms, can inadvertently, or sometimes even intentionally, if manipulated by external actors like cynical marketers or political strategists, foster an environment where individual critical thinking is de-emphasized, sidelined in favor of unquestioning group loyalty and adherence to a shared, often idealized or distorted reality.
Making people easier to manipulate.
Precisely. This makes individuals far more susceptible to manipulation, whether from the emergent will of the egregore itself or from those who consciously harness its power for their own ends. The worship can thus lead to a form of cognitive capture, where the collective's truth becomes the only acceptable truth, further solidifying its control and progressively eroding the individual's capacity for independent thought, self-reflection, and ultimately self-worth outside the group.
And celebrities themselves are caught in this complex power dilemma too, aren't they? They wield enormous influence, which can be used for immense good, but there are also significant risks and criticisms associated with that power.
They absolutely wield immense influence, particularly in the age of social media, which inevitably creates a significant power dilemma for them and for society. On one hand, numerous celebrities have proven instrumental in bringing attention to social issues like human rights, poverty, environmental protection, climate change. They can effectively use their vast platforms to raise awareness, mobilize support for causes, and even influence political discourse or donations.
But it's not always seen positively.
No, not at all. Celebrity advocacy is not without its valid criticisms. It can often be perceived, sometimes fairly, as oversimplifying complex issues, lacking tangible impact beyond raising awareness, or worse, being superficial or self-serving, driven more by public relations and image management than genuine conviction or understanding.
And getting political is risky for them.
Furthermore, a celebrity's decision to post explicitly political content can be a real double-edged sword. It risks alienating large portions of their fan base or the general public, or their message might be dismissed as a mere publicity stunt or virtue signaling, potentially undermining the cause they claim to support.
So the sheer scale of their influence means the egregore they embody can have massive, sometimes unintended consequences.
Yes. The immense influence of celebrities, particularly when amplified exponentially by social media algorithms, means that the egregore they embody, the collective thought forms surrounding their persona, can, if left unchecked or if it takes a negative turn, powerfully shape public perception, reinforce ideologies, and at times spiral beyond control. This mirrors how mass media narratives function similarly, reinforcing collective beliefs that may distort reality on a societal scale. The celebrity egregore is just a particularly potent example of this broader media effect. Wow. So what does this all mean for us, the listeners, trying to navigate this complex world filled with these powerful influences? How do we navigate these unseen forces that are clearly influencing our lives and the collective current around us? This brings us to our final part, Part 5. Navigating the unseen, awareness, autonomy, and conscious engagement. It's not just about esoteric ideas, right? Science has something useful to say here too, ways to understand this without fully buying into psychic entities. Absolutely. Understanding the dynamics of collective belief and influence doesn't solely rely on esoteric interpretations like egregores. Several established scientific and psychological frameworks offer powerful complementary perspectives that help demystify some of these phenomena using more conventional terms.
Like what, for example?
Well, for example, social identity theory, or SIT, is very relevant. It posits that individuals derive a significant portion of their self-esteem and sense of identity from their membership in social groups. This naturally leads to in-group favoritism, strong group cohesion, and powerful collective action. Fandoms, viewed through this lens, provide a very strong sense of belonging and enhance self-esteem for their members by offering a ready-made community and shared identity.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about that incredible feeling you get at a big concert or a rally where everyone is screaming and singing along in perfect unison? That's not just a casual gathering. It feels like something bigger is happening.
That's precisely where the concept of collective effervescence comes in, a term originally proposed by the sociologist Emile Durkheim. CE describes that state of intense shared emotional activation and sense of unison that emerges during powerful collective behaviors like concerts, sporting events, religious rituals, or even protests.
What does it do to people?
This phenomenon dramatically shifts focus from the individual self to the group identity. It fosters a powerful sensation of sacredness around the shared activity or symbol and generates intense communal emotion, making people feel part of something much larger, more meaningful, and more powerful than themselves. It's a documented psychological effect of group synchrony.
And projection.
And then there's psychological projection, which plays a significant role in explaining the intensity of parasocial relationships. This well-understood mechanism explains how individuals unconsciously project their own desires, dreams, unmet needs, and unfulfilled ambitions onto celebrities, who then become convenient avatars for our aspirations. This accounts for the deep identification and intense emotional investment observed in fandoms without necessarily needing to invoke independently existing non-physical entities.
So these scientific models offer powerful insights into the mechanisms of collective energy and group behavior, whether or not you personally believe in the literal existence of egregores as entities.
Exactly. They provide alternative, scientifically grounded explanations for many of the observed phenomena.
So there are scientific ways to explain a lot of this. What about more outright skeptical views or reductionist approaches to the whole egregore idea itself?
That's a fair and important point to cover. Skeptical views and reductionist approaches offer alternative understandings that explicitly don't require belief in autonomous psychic entities. For instance, some scholars, like the traditionalist philosopher René Guénon, argued quite strongly that the collective is merely an extension of the individual, lacking anything truly transcendent or independently conscious. It's just the sum of its parts, nothing more.
So the egregore concept could just be a metaphor.
From this perspective, yes. The concept of egregores can be interpreted purely metaphorically as representing a group mind, collective habits, or cultural momentum. Some even talk about a technological egregore, for instance, considering how vast AI systems might manifest collective human intention and data patterns without having consciousness themselves. These interpretations use the term but strip it of literal entity status.
So scientific models focus on biases and social influence.
Right. Scientific models further explain the evolution and persistence of belief systems, including intense fandoms or ideologies, through mechanisms like cognitive biases, confirmation bias, groupthink, social contagion, ideas spreading like viruses, and social influence dynamics, conformity, obedience. They focus on how internal coherence within a belief system and social conformity pressures shape collective thought and behavior, offering explanations grounded in observable psychology and sociology.
So it's not necessarily about whether egregores are real entities in a literal, objective sense, but more about acknowledging the undeniable impact of collective belief and attention, regardless of how we define or label the underlying force itself.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway. The concept of egregore itself is subject to varied interpretations, from the literal occult view to the purely metaphorical psychological one. For a broader and more complete understanding, it's crucial, I think, to explore this whole spectrum rather than adhering rigidly to a single dogmatic definition.
But the core argument remains valid across these interpretations.
Yes, the core argument remains profoundly valid regardless. Collective belief, focused attention, and shared emotion undeniably create powerful forces that profoundly impact human behavior, shape cultures, and drive history, whether one views these forces as literal entities or as emergent psychological and sociological phenomena.
So the question of who's worshiping who still holds, even metaphorically.
Absolutely. It translates into a critical self-inquiry relevant to everyone. Are individuals consciously directing their collective energy and attention towards goals they truly value? Or are they perhaps unconsciously caught in powerful emergent psychological and sociological feedback loops fueled by media, technology, and innate human needs for belonging that effectively dictate their behavior, making them servants to these collective forces without even realizing it?
Okay, so the big question for all of us then, regardless of our metaphysical beliefs, is how do we reclaim our agency in the face of these powerful collective forces, seen or unseen? This is where the practical strategies come in, actionable steps we can all actually take in our daily lives.
Yes, and interestingly, even within the esoteric traditions that discuss egregores literally, there's a consistent emphasis on awareness and responsibility in interacting with them. They assert that developing this awareness enables individuals to engage with them intentionally or recognizing when they are shaping our perceptions without our awareness. It's about conscious choice.
So let's break down some concrete, step-by-step strategies for conscious engagement and reclaiming your personal agency, drawn from various perspectives. First, and perhaps most importantly, just basic self-reflection and awareness. Stopping to think.
This is absolutely foundational. It is vital to regularly, maybe even daily, question your motivations and honestly assess your level of attachment to any particular celebrity, brand, ideology, or online group. Try to recognize when an attachment starts becoming excessive, obsessive, or detrimental to your well-being or finances.
What kind of questions should you ask yourself?
Ask yourself critical questions such as, why do I idolize this particular celebrity or follow this influencer so closely? What emotional need or void does their presence seem to fill in my life? Am I projecting my own unfulfilled desires or insecurities onto them? Is this engagement making me feel better or worse about myself overall? This kind of honest self-inquiry is the essential first step to disentangling yourself from unconscious influence.
Okay, step one, self-awareness. Second, diversify your interests. Don't put all your energetic and emotional eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly. Actively explore and cultivate new avenues for joy, meaning, and fulfillment in your own life. Broadening one's horizons beyond the often narrow celebrity bubble or a single online community is crucial for psychological resilience.
What does that look like practically?
This means actively exploring new hobbies, maybe learning a skill, delving into different kinds of sports or physical activities, immersing yourself in diverse literature or art forms, or experiencing new cultures through travel or local exploration. Diversifying your interests provides alternative, healthy sources of joy, purpose, connection, and self-esteem, which directly reduces over-reliance on any single external figure or group for your sense of identity or happiness. It creates a more robust and resilient internal world.
Third, setting boundaries, especially crucial with the digital egregores that thrive on our constant online engagement. This seems critical in our always-on, notification-driven world.
Absolutely essential today. For digital egregores sustained by relentless social media engagement, this means consciously setting clear boundaries around usage. Don't be afraid to implement screen time limits on certain apps, schedule digital detox periods, or curate your feeds ruthlessly unfollow accounts that trigger negative comparison, anxiety, or obsessive behavior.
And prioritize real life.
Yes, consciously prioritize moving important relationships offline. Invest time and energy in real-world connections with friends, family, and local community members. Actively seek out or help create genuine community spaces, whether online or offline, that foster authentic, reciprocal interactions and mutual support, rather than relying solely on the often illusory intimacy of parasocial relationships or performative online groups. Disconnect sometimes to reconnect with what truly matters.
Fourth, cultivate critical media literacy. Don't just passively consume. Learn to analyze what you're consuming and why.
Empower yourself with knowledge. Educate yourself on the underlying psychology of fandom, persuasion, and influence. Learn about the mechanisms of social influence, cognitive biases, and the common tactics of media manipulation, from subtle advertising and PR spin to the engineering of viral trends and political propaganda.
Why does this help?
Understanding how these forces work, the techniques used to capture attention and sway opinion, can empower individuals to make more informed and conscious choices about their engagement with celebrities, brands, political figures, and broader media narratives. Don't just consume, actively analyze. Ask yourself, what is this content trying to make me feel? What is it trying to make me buy or believe? Whose interest does it serve?
And finally, number 5, conscious energy direction. This brings it right back to the core concept of egregores and collective energy. We can actually choose where we send our focus and passion.
This is perhaps the most empowering step because it frames us as active participants, not just passive recipients. Individuals possess immense latent power in choosing where they collectively direct their energy and attention. This involves consciously deciding to withdraw energy from harmful ones. For example, corporate egregores that promote unsustainable consumption or unethical practices, media egregores that deliberately sow division and fear, or nationalist egregores that foster exclusion and conflict.
How do you withdraw energy?
By consciously choosing alternatives. Supporting independent journalism instead of sensationalist corporate media, patronizing local businesses instead of multinational giants, actively questioning dominant narratives, and refusing to participate in toxic online dynamics. Conversely, individuals can deliberately choose to strengthen life-affirming egregores, collective endeavors focused on positive goals.
Like what?
Through community building, fostering mutual support systems and local resilience, engaging in environmental protection efforts, supporting ethical businesses and organizations, and promoting dialogue and understanding across divides. Every thought, every dollar spent, every share, every act of participation is an investment of energy. Choose wisely where you invest yours.
This all really boils down to an ethical imperative for awareness, doesn't it? It's not just about personal self-help or optimizing your life. It's about responsible participation in our shared reality, understanding the impact of our collective choices.
It absolutely does. The potential dangers associated with unchecked collective entities, manipulation, radicalization, polarization, the loss of individual identity, cult-like devotion, financial exploitation, highlight a profound ethical imperative for conscious engagement with these forces.
Because these dangers arise when things spiral.
Yes, these dangers arise when egregores, or the collective dynamics they represent, spiral beyond control, or when individuals become unconsciously controlled by the very forces they helped create through their unexamined participation. A persistent lack of awareness and critical discernment allows the potentially parasitic nature of some egregores to take hold, subtly transforming collective devotion or enthusiasm into a form of unwitting servitude.
So this transforms the whole theoretical discussion into something very practical and ethically charged for every one of us.
Exactly. Understanding egregores, whether you interpret them literally or metaphorically, isn't just a fun thought experiment or an obscure esoteric curiosity. It emerges as a profound necessity for navigating modern life responsibly and maintaining psychological autonomy.
And the act of worship implies that transfer of power.
Precisely. The act of worship, in its broadest sense meaning intense, focused devotion of energy and attention, always implies a transfer of power from the individual to the object of worship. Conscious engagement, then, is fundamentally about reclaiming that power, making deliberate choices about where your energy flows.
So the discussion moves from just describing the problem to prescribing actionable solutions.
Yes, offering actionable strategies for reclaiming agency by consciously cultivating self-awareness and deliberately directing collective energy towards positive, life-affirming outcomes. This empowers individuals to become active, intentional participants in shaping the collective reality we all inhabit, rather than remaining passive subjects unknowingly influenced by its powerful, unseen currents. It's about choosing to consciously build the world you want to live in, rather than being unconsciously built by the unseen forces generated by our collective habits.
So wrapping this all up, what's the main takeaway? Our deep dive into egregores and celebrity culture, who's really worshiping who, clearly reveals a profound and incredibly dynamic interplay, not a simple unidirectional answer like fans worship stars.
Not at all. It underscores the immense, almost tangible power inherent in collective belief, focused attention, and shared emotional investment, regardless of whether these energies are consciously directed towards chosen goals or unconsciously siphoned off by external forces.
Our analysis suggests that while fans actively engage with and admire celebrities, often finding genuine connection and community, their collective focus and intense emotional devotion can inadvertently contribute to the formation and strengthening of egregores.
Right. These non-physical entities or potent thought forms, once sufficiently empowered by that collective energy, can then exert influence back upon their creators, the fans, and potentially even the celebrities themselves, subtly shifting the power dynamic in ways most people don't perceive.
And the whole evolution of celebrity, supercharged by mass media and now ubiquitous social platforms, has created this incredibly sophisticated mechanism for channeling and concentrating collective attention on an unprecedented scale.
Absolutely. The carefully crafted illusion of intimacy through parasocial interaction, the relentless commodification of identity turning people into brands, and the very structure of modern fandoms as highly efficient egregore incubators all demonstrate how everyday activities, including pervasive consumerism, can function as potent modern rituals that continuously feed and strengthen these collective entities.
And this highlights the absolutely critical need for discernment and critical thinking in our daily lives as we navigate this media-saturated environment.
Definitely. The potential for egregores, or the collective dynamics they represent, to become parasitic or manipulative, leading to phenomena like celebrity worship syndrome, toxic online behavior, and even cult-like dynamics within some fandoms, underscores a subtle but incredibly significant shift in agency.
This is where that collective devotion, if unchecked by awareness, can tragically erode individual identity, critical thinking, and personal autonomy, leading to a kind of unwitting servitude to a collective force, whether it's a fandom, a brand, or an ideology.
Ultimately, however, the power, the source of the energy, always lies with the individuals that make up the collective. While egregores are described as powerful forces shaped by human energy and attention, they are not immutable, fixed destinies. They can be changed, starved, or redirected.
So conscious engagement and critical awareness are paramount for navigating this complex landscape without losing ourselves.
They're absolutely paramount. By truly understanding the mechanisms through which collective entities form, gain power, and exert influence, whether viewed through an esoteric or a psychological lens, individuals can begin to reclaim their agency and make conscious choices about where they place their focus and invest their energy.
Which involves that deliberate self-reflection we talked about, actively diversifying interests beyond singular obsessions, setting clear and healthy boundaries with media consumption, especially online, and actively cultivating a sharp media literacy to see behind the curtain.
Exactly. And more broadly, it entails a conscious and sometimes courageous choice to deliberately direct your collective energy, however small your contribution may seem, towards beneficial outcomes. Supporting life-affirming initiatives, challenging harmful narratives, fostering genuine community, and vigorously questioning agendas that seek to manipulate or control through collective emotion.
This mindful participation seems essential for collectively shaping a reality that truly serves human well-being, rather than us being unknowingly shaped and directed by the unseen forces our own collective attention generates.
Couldn't said it better myself.
So, for you, our listener, here's a final thought to ponder as you go about your day, maybe as you scroll through your feeds. Consider the vast, unseen currents of collective energy that flow around us constantly, influencing everything from the brands we buy and the news we believe to the celebrities we admire and the causes we support.
How might consciously choosing where you direct your focus, your beliefs, and your passion not only redefine your own sense of agency and personal well-being, but also subtly yet profoundly contribute to reshaping the very fabric of our shared world? Something to think about.
I hope you have enjoyed today's deep dive on the DeepSeek Diaries. Please don't forget to check out the linked resources in the description section for all the sources we discussed today.
A lot of fascinating reading there if you want to go deeper.
Definitely. And hit the subscribe and like buttons as you head off if you haven't already. It really helps us out. Until the next deep dive, goodbye.